I've been looking forward to this conversation too, man, because I still be, listening to that audio that we had made some years ago. And you already know, I shout out to the crowd, infinite games versus finite games. Yeah, man, I've been, taking a lot of the things that you've put on your channel, but also from our conversation a few years back and been implementing them. So,
yeah, I'm really happy because one of the things that separated you from the pack is the fact that you actually implemented it.
Are you tired of struggling with your options trading? The highest paid .online is having a March Madness sale on the VIP course. Use code MARCH40 to receive 40% off the VIP course. This sale ends on March 31st, 2025. Go to highestpaid.online and get started today.
So how you doing, everybody? My name is David W. Williams, but also known as Diamond Dave, talking to Roz today, and really happy to have this because I want to follow up with him. And we're going to kind of get into a really, really basic conversation around leadership, kind of what motivates people to lead, the importance of leadership, and how you should kind of look at leadership in your personal life, but also from your larger family, your extended community. And one of the reasons why we wanted to get in this, because I feel like leadership is lacking in a lot of different areas, and it's detrimental to our communities because we don't have that leadership, right? So I wanted to bring on somebody that is actively involved in leading in their own way. They're actively involved in their community. They're a blessing and they're a benefit to their community. And these are the kind of people that I think need to be profiled and put on. We need to profile them and kind of get in touch with what they're doing, as opposed to kind of what the media is putting in front of us on a day-to-day basis. So, Roz, man, what's going on with you?
Man, everything. How you feeling, Diamond Day?
I'm doing good, man. So I know you from, I believe you from East Cleveland. Is that correct?
I'm from the east side of Cleveland. So East Cleveland is actually its own jurisdiction. So I'm from the southeast side of Cleveland.
Okay, from the southeast side of Cleveland. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you still operating out of the Ohio area? You doing something different?
Yep. No, I'm still I'm actually in the southeast side of Cleveland right now, man. My official title, I started off as the entrepreneur in residence for the city of Cleveland, right?
Okay.
Helping businesses, but I've really transitioned most recently to a neighborhood investment manager for the southeast side of Cleveland, working with the Department of Economic Development for the city.
Okay, so let me ask you a real quick question, because we're talking about leadership.
Yep.
As you continue to progress professionally in your life, what made you decide to stay in your area as opposed to kind of moving around the country?
Man, the importance of family.
Okay.
And I think a lot of your videos really spoke to my decision to really get my home base here. Because, right, I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and there's a lot of Clevelanders who be like, after 18, I'm getting up out of there. And that's really how I felt too at 18. I went to Morehouse. I lived in a whole bunch of different cities and had opportunities, but really understanding that my power base is here, that if I'm really trying to build power, my family is here, my niece, you know what I'm saying? The younger generation is here, the older generation is here. And so me being a leader and being that patriarch in my family, I can't really affect them if I'm 5 hours away, 7 hours away, 12 hours away, right? So being able to just pull up on my niece at her, you know what I'm saying, recitals and do that whole thing, or go by and check on my father to make sure that he's cool, right? So just my core values of family really got me here, because this is where the base at.
Yeah, I feel you, because like I stayed in Florida for an extended period of time, and I finally decided to come up out of Florida to move to Georgia. But one of the reasons why I chose Georgia, because it was still relatively close to Florida. So if I need to get back down south, I can, if I have to, I can jump in a car and just drive down 75 to get back to Orlando.
Right.
If I got to fly, the flight is like 45 minutes to an hour, compared to when I was living in Houston. The distance between Houston and Florida was so much further, because I drove from Orlando to Houston the first time. Took me like 3 days to do it. And I kind of realized is that I'm very much separated from my family and my, like you said, my base of power, from being out so far away from where I'm at. So I understand that. But one of the things I dealt with from living in Florida so long, especially living in Orlando, was kind of feeling like I was doing the same thing over and over again, and kind of feeling low-key burnt out on the environment. Have you experienced that, staying in the same environment for such an extended period of time?
No, I haven't. Okay. I think it's any city is different when you got some money in your pocket. So I definitely came up southeast side of Cleveland, humble beginnings, and the city looked totally different as a child, and also, coming back to the city as an air quote broke college student. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I've been able to tap into different networks, different, you know, environments, different places and things. And so it's also been a lot of development in Cleveland over the past 5 years to where it wasn't restaurants and things. We done built up the waterfront a little bit. So it's more to get into, but really just staying focused, man, staying out the way. I just was, you know, Super Bowl just passed and I was over there with my family, right? I don't even really watch football like that, but you know what I'm saying, going over there to be with the fam. And one of my cousins was like, when you going back? And I'm like, what you mean? She's like, you know, you're going back to Atlanta, right? I'm like, no, I've been here. And so but I just realized that I've been in the house, you know what I'm saying? Well, my family didn't even really know that I was staying here. So it's part of it is, there are things to do. And part of it, man, just staying on the grind. I don't even really, you know, get into it like that.
I feel you. So one of the things I noticed, because like I said, I'm from Orlando, is growing up there, seeing a lot of changes in the city, seeing it come from like a slow city, a little more fast paced and starting to expand. And then as I get older, realizing that there was a lot of opportunity that wasn't taken, I would say, pursued by a lot of people in my area when I was younger. And now we're dealing with the detriment of that. So what we're seeing in Orlando, a lot of gentrification, the west side of the city, a lot of Black people being moved out of the city, being replaced by other ethnic groups. Because a lot of people when I was younger really didn't make the necessary sacrifice, also some of the necessary moves to make sure that we are good there from an economic standpoint. And I've tried to figure out what can be done to try to lessen some of that going on. But what kind of like so far down the road, I don't know what can be done at this time. When you're looking at Cleveland and you being a Cleveland native, what have you kind of seen in Cleveland that maybe wasn't dealt with properly when you were younger that now Cleveland people or the Black side of Cleveland's having to deal with?
Man, I think you pretty much hit it on the head. So if we really want to get into it, man, Cleveland, the east side of Cleveland, right? Okay. Cleveland is a very segregated city. So everybody who know the Black people are on the east side of Cleveland, white folks and Spanish speaking people are on the west side of Cleveland. And when I say east side, west side, downtown is pretty much the center, right? So on this side of downtown, Black people, that side of downtown, whites and Hispanic people. On the east side of Cleveland, even more recently, right, where and from a contemporary redliner standpoint, and we could get into why, but east side of Cleveland was cut out of a lot of dollars from and if we want to get into it, the previous mayoral administration for whatever reason. And so we've seen a disinvestment. It's a lot of blight over there. We've seen all of these different houses go into disrepair. But even while this is going on, we see out-of-towners coming in from all of these different foreign places and even just, you know what I mean, other states coming in and buying up the housing stock. Because Cleveland is so, man, we got so much potential here because we got the lakefront, 3 professional teams, one of the best arts districts in the country, yada, yada, yada. And the cost of living is pretty great. But just like you said, a lot of the natives who were here, they really couldn't see the forest for the trees. And they were just so used to everything being how it was and not understanding that, you know, they're not by not being in position now, you won't be able to get into position later. Right? Yeah. Folks are buying up all the houses. So now I see the exact same things going on in Cleveland and work, like I say, with just my work with economic development, figuring out how we can keep people in their homes, figuring out how we can develop these business corridors at the same time. And that's going to take some public and private partnership to get it done. So no, I'm seeing the exact same things here in Cleveland. Exactly.
So what would be some of your visions to try to improve the situation in Cleveland from a business standpoint? Do you see it from more of a mix of I need some private partnerships? Do you think that Cleveland and the particular areas that you are need more of a business footprint? Do you think they need more stability from the standpoint of that the people living there need more job stability? Like, what do you think are going to be some of the solutions to improve the lives of the Black residents in the southeast or the east part of Cleveland?
Man, it's that's a great question, and it's funny because this kind of ties into the conversation. I imagine, like even later on, some of the things I want to talk about of just how you influence me in the work that I do daily in and out in the city. Okay. And it doesn't feel like work because I'm really hands-on with my sector of the city, affecting the budget, affecting the legislation, you know what I mean? And so we're working through that right now. The whole administration in Cleveland is about this Southeast Side promise because it's invested for so long. So the current mayor ran on the Southeast Side promise. So we're actually going through right now and figuring out how we can get a special improvements district to support the business development that's coming through the neighborhood to keep the area so people will want to come and shop, to keep it safe, to keep it looking nice. You know what I mean? Also working on transit oriented development so people can people can walk to a bus stop or walk to a train station relatively quickly and then be able to move throughout the city. So I think it's a few different things, man. I would like to see more of that business footprint and imprint here, just bringing some more jobs. But as you talked about on your channel, that's going to require some training to get people to a place to where they can hold down those jobs. And I think Tri-C, Cuyahoga Community College, we got here, one of the premier community colleges in the country is right here in the city. So I think we could actually do that. But public safety is a whole nother thing, having something for the youth to do. You know what I mean? That's a whole nother situation. So it's a confluence of things, man. But I definitely, I'm like you, where it starts from the jobs. And then, of course, that goes into being able to have new housing stock. Because one of the things in Cleveland is that the analogy is we've got houses, right? But it's like a refrigerator full of rotten food.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we got the houses, but they just in such bad shape that we can't really do anything. And people are moving outside of the city, which of course exacerbates the issue of we don't have the tax dollars to do things. So bringing the industry inside of the city, providing whatever tax incentives that we could get them, but TIFs, whatever it be, abatements, all that good stuff. And then those jobs will help people buy houses in the city is how I'm seeing it. That's really what's going on.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So one of the things that we've dealt with, I talk about Orlando because I'm there. Orlando's a little bit of different monster because it's such a bigger city.
Yeah.
Orlando was really based on a lot of tourism. And so as a result, we didn't really need our residents to be highly educated or highly skilled. So when I was growing up, a lot of the Black people in Orlando, they worked in the tourism side. A lot of Black women worked as domestics in like rich white people's homes. And then also a lot of people at one time picked oranges. So none of those jobs really take a large amount of skill. They don't really take a large amount of training. The challenge was that as Orlando started to develop, they lessened those jobs. You're easy to replace when you don't have those skills and have those trainings. Because one difference between where you're at in a part of the country and where I'm at, where I'm from, is we don't have that organized labor footprint outside of maybe like fire and police.
Okay.
So you're an individual contractor really working. Let's say you're working in the hotel industry, and then you get replaced by immigrants who are willing to work for less money than you because they're able to come, and to give you an example, we'll bring people in from Haiti who barely speak any English, but if they know how to clean, they can work in a hotel.
Right.
So you're now dealing with this type of economic competition. And so one of the biggest challenges we've had in our city is because they needed so many people to work in those areas, they wouldn't educate you past that. And so that's something that I've talked about with Erica, to where it's very important when you're raising your family, understand like what's the economy in that area, because that's often what they're going to educate you for. So me being from an area of the country where it was about picking fruit, working in tourism, or being a domestic, you weren't really being educated for more than that. But now the society has started to advance. So people are coming to Orlando that are highly skilled, and they're pushing out the less skilled people. And I don't think the word has really gone out that people really need to start trying to upskill themselves so we can get that economic stability. Because the thing about tourism is that it's seasonal. Picking oranges is seasonal. Working as a domestic is really based on the people that you're working for having the ability to pay you. It's hard to build off that foundation. And Orlando was not really rolling out a lot of the housing programs they rolled out before to make sure that we can have that kind of stability. So one of the things that I really appreciate about you is that you can see the bigger picture of how these economic systems work, because a lot of times we get very binary in our thinking and don't understand that it is a ecosystem that needs to be built to make this work, as opposed to this single factor analysis. If I just do this one thing, everything will work out.
Right.
That doesn't really work if we're trying to plan this and structure this properly. We're talking about leadership. That's why we're going into it. And so I really appreciate the fact that you can think and see it on the multiple levels, because we just can't see it to where if I just go to college and get a college degree, I'm good, because we need other things working in concert with all of this to make our communities work properly.
Word. No, I definitely appreciate that, Dave. And I would credit your channel and just your perspectives, elevating me, allowing me to, get to that level, man. So thank you for that.
No problem, man. But it's really you, because you were able to get it. So, you came in with the ability to get it. And one of the biggest, so that's why I said that we got to continue to encourage people like yourself and encourage other people around the country because you can get it. And that's how these things got to get built. Because Roz, I look at it from the standpoint of that, if we needed to run a country, we got to have people that have the ability to see it on multiple levels and not just see it on the one level, because we got to run a whole country. So that's what I'm trying to get people to understand, because I really do believe this, that one day we're going to have to run things. I don't believe that the people that are in power are going to always be in power.
Right.
So if we don't start thinking from that particular level, when we now have to steward over the whole situation, we're not going to be prepared for it, because we haven't prepared people before time to do it.
Man.
So that's something I'm really believing in.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. And one of the things from the class and of course the video from a minute ago that you dropped on me and kind of just been ringing in my ear and really inspires me, you know, more so than it does it is some people think that it's dangerous for them to not be in power, where many of us have been taught it's dangerous for us to be in power.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Exactly. So taking on the headache and the responsibility of leadership versus the heartache and the anguish of somebody else telling you what it should be, and you know, you just having to deal and live with that. So taking that and making sure that I am intrinsically involved with my local government, you know what I mean? Being in position to affect legislation. I don't take that for granted, or being able to change up these economic development programs that were for the southeast side of Cleveland, but they really weren't developed with the southeast side of Cleveland in mind. So I totally, I'm on that.
Yeah, Dylan. So something we'll kind of roll into what you talked about is understanding that, again, many of us have been socialized that we should not be in power, and other people have been socialized that the world won't work if they're not in power. They've been socialized that they need to be in control of every situation.
Yep.
And I've had to understand that even though sometimes leadership is difficult, it can be disappointing. You don't always get what you want. Sometimes you're not trying to fight the people that you're trying to lead and put in the best position, but it's worth it because you see the bigger picture. Those are some of the things that I've dealt with in trying to learn how to manage those relationships and manage sometimes those disappointments, but continuing to lead. What are some of the things that you've dealt with in leadership to where even if things didn't go your way, you've kind of realized I have to still keep carrying on because the bigger picture is kind of bigger than how I feel right now currently?
Man, if we really gonna get into it, I went through a whole divorce, you know what I mean, and still had to lead and still had one of the best years in Bro Capital during that time. From a leadership standpoint, brought on more members, made more revenue. But yeah, that just personal life, right? We both understand you can't just turn off what's going on in your personal life from what's going on in your business life, especially as an entrepreneur. So that was one of the major things that really just taught me how to lead past pain and how to lead past my own hurts, right? Because that ain't had nothing to do with the business that was going on at the time. Another thing is the people who you are attempting to lead, I don't want to say not necessarily respecting your leadership, but they don't hold the vision like you hold it, right? To where if you were the visionary of the whole situation and you were the one that said, hey, y'all, let's put this together, let's do this thing, that you got to be the one to maintain the integrity of the vision. Because I remember one of your videos you talked about, there was a time you were developing a film and you were building the team around it, and there were other people come and say, hey, we should do it like this, we should do it like this. And it's like, nah, this is the vision, this is what we started it for, this is exactly what we're gonna do. So really just being firm on that vision, man, and staying 10 toes down, even when people don't see it. I also think about the difficulties of just seasonality when it comes to business. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you're not always gonna have a particular level of or a particular amount of revenue, but still having to figure it out, having to pivot. Also, right, we've been around, and I'm thinking about Bro Capital in particular, we've been around since 2016. And so we've had to, go through different social climates and different political zeitgeists and see different administrations and go through that, to where, it was extremely polarizing with the first Trump administration. Then it was Biden, kind of got lulled to sleep a little bit, but now it's back on to this, we got to do something. Everybody's in a panic mode. So managing that and just seeing that through and being flexible as an organization to see how people are being affected through these changes so that we can still meet them where they at.
Yeah, definitely. When you're talking about that vision, that's something that I think is really, really important, because I've had a vision as far as what I want to do, and people will get attracted to it sometimes because they see the momentum of it. But then you will find out that maybe they really didn't understand what direction you were trying to take it, because I don't think they often sit down and really get one-to-one. So Roz, if I was going to attach myself to what you're doing, I would make sure that I have a really good understanding, if I have the ability to sit down with you and kind of talk about, okay, where are you trying to take this? What's your vision? Can you communicate it to me to the best of your ability, or to the best of what you can clue me in? It's not my job to know everything. So I can really understand what I'm getting attached to and where you're trying to go, as opposed to sometimes getting caught up in the enthusiasm of the situation.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when we're dealing with people, is sometimes they can be enthusiastic but not really know. And in me as a creative, I very much can see it in my mind's eye where I'm trying to go. And I know where I'm trying to go. And I'm trying to figure out, does this person also understand where we're trying to take it? And they're on board with that, as opposed to maybe just the enthusiasm, because I'm still enthusiastic about the situation, even when it's not going well. And you kind of talked about that. I'm so inspired and passionate about what I'm doing. Even sometimes when it's not going the way I wanted to go, I still wake up every day and get right back to it. Because to me, where I'm trying to go and what I know the end result would be is so important. I know that I'm going to have pitfalls and trials and tribulations in between, but I still got to just keep pushing to it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question about leadership. I never had this strong desire to be in a position of power. Never had this strong desire to always want to tell people to do. I don't have really like an authoritarian mindset. I'm not really that type of person. So we start looking at character archetypes. I'm more of what people call the reluctant leader, where it was more of the situation necessitated my leadership. When you're looking at your leadership style and how you lead, do you feel like more you were put in a position of leadership because of the situation necessitated it? Was it something that you feel like you were born for? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Man, I think really it's a combination of all three of those things, right? I feel like I was born for it. I feel like the situation necessitated it, but I also feel like I've developed myself to be able to do it. So for example, prime example, I just gave you the story about my family and being in the city of Cleveland and, you know, being a leader in my family at this point, right? I feel like I was low-key born for that. But at the same time, my entrepreneurial journey, my professional journey, and really just being serious about developing the skill of leadership, I think I actually did it that way. But I also think that I noticed issues and patterns, right? Like you say, being able to see the entire game. And I can see 20 years down the line that if we don't do this right now, that there's going to be an even bigger issue down the road. So if I don't do it, you know what I mean? It's kind of like I'm just going to be convicted every single night when I try to go to sleep that, right, I'm not doing what I've been called to do. So I feel like you say, just taking the importance of, as we talked about again in the course, the importance of leadership and the importance of being a good leader, right? Because we also have learned, or there's just this prevailing perspective that only bad people are drawn to leadership, that if you want to be in a position of power, that you must be inherently flawed in some way, shape, or form. And as we talked about, no, every situation requires leadership, and it's up to your personal morality how you're going to choose to lead that situation, right? So yeah, man, that's I forgot what the question was. Oh, ultimately, like, right. So I feel like it's a combination of reluctant leader, but at the same time, I have to do it, you know, but I also feel compelled that I was chosen to do it, right? And I didn't necessarily choose to do it. So it's, you know.
I agree with you too, because I know I had taught you, and we kind of explored the idea of the archetypes. And something I've been able to recognize in my life is that we talked about the rebel archetype, but then the rebel archetype being forced into leadership. So if you look at, for people that are watching, if you look at TV shows like Andor, where the lead character Andor was the rebel archetype, and then over time the situations necessitated him going into a leadership position. Mel Gibson in Thunderdome, similar rebel archetype, forced into a leadership position. And so again, you're talking about me having this conviction, me living a certain lifestyle. and knowing that I could be doing something different and knowing I could be a positive impact to people, and something pulling to me, asking me why I wasn't doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then me finally realizing that if I don't do something, I'm kind of complicit to what's going on, because I know I could be making a change for the better and helping people out, but I'm choosing to ignore it because I'm having individual personalized success.
Yep.
And so that's really what convicted me to start trying to change it, and then having to deal with everything that's going on. But let me roll into this, because we also talked about this when you took the course. How were you dealing with, and we're seeing this a lot in the world, so let me give an example. This new narrative that's kind of being pushed on a political level, to where diversity is bad and everything should be kind of based on merit. And we're going to create this flat world to where if you just are qualified and you have these particular, you hit these particular, I guess, KPIs or characteristics, then your merit will open up the doors and you're allowed to be successful, because we're only going to evaluate things by merit. And something that I'm very passionate about is understanding that how sometimes our values and principles can be used against us. And sometimes we're dealing with people that are not being genuine with us, but trying to get us to play this artificial game that they're creating that we're never going to be able to win. And how does that impact our ability to lead? So if I start believing that, okay, now everything's about merit and meritocracy, and so I should build this type of structure out, but in reality, that's not the game that they're playing. How are you dealing this in this new particular political era where they're trying to push these narratives, which can eventually move down to the state and the local level? How do you think that's going to impact your leadership in your community?
Man, I think, I think just this idea that meritocracy will ever prevail is just so far from the truth because of people's implicit bias. You know what I mean? Especially, and I catch it all the time. Young black male, long hair, right? Before you hear me speak or before you know my title or my position, you standing on the other side of the elevator, locking your car doors, right? And so that's just gonna be what it is. But understanding that it's even more important for us to build our own systems. And that's why I realized with Bro Capital, where my partner and I, we had pitched all across the country. They told us we had the best pitch that they had ever heard in their life, right? But we didn't fit the traditional mold of a young white entrepreneur, you know what I mean, who had actually worked at Bain and Company or Goldman Sachs or something like that before, right? That's what they were looking for. And they told us time and time again, great pitch, love it, your post revenue, but we don't want to invest. Well, I learned real quick that they could tell you, yes, you're the best one I've ever seen. That was literally the best pitch I've ever seen. You did the work, but we're still not going to invest in you. So that's where the idea for Bro Capital came, is that we got to come up with our own friends, family, and fools round, right? Because if we don't have a friends and family round to even get to that seed round, to get to an A, B, C, right, exit round, then we don't have anything. So building our own systems is important for us to invest in ourselves. But even shout out to our Jewish counterparts, where Cleveland is a city on the east side of Cleveland. There's also a very prominent Jewish population, right? And shout out to the Cavs being owned by Dan Gilbert, right? So they definitely have a strong presence in the city. And they also have institutions in which they're able to create a safety net for themselves, right? Where you have the community centers, but you also have the interest-free loan association, to where they're able to get capital. And shout out to the Hebrew Free Loan Association here in Cleveland. Not all of the HFLAs are open to people outside the Jewish community, but the one in Cleveland actually is. But I've been working with them, and I don't even say working with them, but really just taking cues from them to develop our own interest-free loan fund that we can have our people access in our community, right? So even the work, let's say the work I do on the Southeast side, you can have a economic development program that has a 50% matching component to where, oh, I'll give you 5 if you can bring 5. But if you ain't got $5,000 to bring, then you know what I mean, that program is no good for you. So like I say, that's not only am I, doing my best to be at the table to change the program, but then when I step out of the boardroom, organizing with my community to say, hey, let's do this on our own. So I don't know, Dave, I don't really let it affect me, off the strength that we have to do our best to insulate ourselves from it, from an economic development or economic self-defense standpoint, but also, doing our best to be at the table to affect these policies so that we don't get cut out of these dollars, like, you know, the government contracts provide. Shout out to Maynard Jackson, and, you know, just other cities like Atlanta that were able to build their Black business class from government funds. You know what I mean? So on a local level. So yeah,
exactly. But so let's go to some of that Maynard Jackson conversation, because I like how you brought that up. But how do you think we go against the narrative? Because Maynard Jackson said we're going to earmark a certain amount of this particular airport construction to Black funds. So now we're dealing with a contingent of people that would say, well, that's discrimination, yada, yada, yada. Is there a way in which we kind of deal or insulate ourselves against that? Because we know that they're trying to change the narrative where these things shouldn't take place, kind of specifically based on the race of the people. So I'm the kind of person that what my attitude is that we're going to do it because that's what we're going to do. But do you think there's another more diplomatic way or another more professional way to go about it as opposed to just going full steam into it?
And when you say going full steam into it, what do you mean?
Just saying, hey, well, we don't care that you don't like the fact that we are earmarking stuff for Black people. We're going to do it anyway. To me, you're more polished than I am. So is there a way to try to communicate that out, but not just say it, well, we're going to just do it anyway?
Man, you know, and you and I both know, right? Shout out to the GI Bill, the Homestead Act, all of these different economic development programs that didn't require a matching component.
Exactly.
White men, right?
Exactly.
So I think it's on us as leaders, and when we get in these positions, to stand up and say, hey, we ain't gonna play this game with y'all. We see what y'all have done in the past, right? There was all this, you know, all these set asides. And then even beyond that, if we really want to help small businesses, the stats say that people ain't got $2,000 for an emergency. You know what I mean? And if you're a small business owner, a lot of them just created jobs for themselves.
Exactly.
So they have a nest egg of cash that they have on the side. So again, it's for us to really come to the table where it's like, if the laws aren't matching the people, it's not that the people are wrong. We got to change the laws up to meet the people at where they at, meet the policies at where they at. So it's really just, you know, like I say, man, we got to stand on our own too. And then of course, right, having the group behind you, right, where you're not just coming out there on this lone island, but people know that, hey, there are other folks who will support me in this effort.
Okay, I appreciate it. So here's something I want to talk about before we get a little bit deep into Broke Capital. Something I've dealt with in leadership is having people come and go. And what I mean is that I may be in partnership with somebody. That partnership may run its course for whatever reason. I may get into a new partnership. That partnership may run its course for whatever reason. And I'm still having to focus on what the overall large goal is. So I know, like, there's things that I want to do in 2025. Regardless of what happens around me, I need to keep pushing toward those particular goals, because the goal is to continue to expand, get the message out, and teach more people. How have you dealt with people coming and going through your particular life? And how have you stayed focused on the overall larger goal, even as people have come and gone through your life?
I think it's we talk about often we talk about bureaucracy negatively, right? In the sense that the position will be there irrespective of the person, right? The standard operating procedure, the job description is there. I can get another body as long as they willing to comply with the program. You know what I mean? And so really, as you just said, keeping the vision there, but understanding what it is that you're looking for out of your team and out of that particular position, so that you can swap people in and out. But I also think one of the ways that we dealt with it, man, is just keeping a solid core amongst us, right? And we also understand amongst, let's say, the 5 of us, that, yeah, we're doing 85% of the work. But at the same time, if you got a real life situation that you got to go tend to and be able to come back to that. So I think to answer your question, how have I dealt with people coming in and out different positions, man, just holding a vision, building out that team, and being very clear about how these different pieces come together, so that way I can take somebody out and plug somebody else in and keep the ball rolling.
So how did you learn how to build that kind of organizational structure? Because that's something that I have had challenges with. Really, my biggest issue was training people to do the job, right? Thinking that if I brought somebody on and they say I got a background in this, that they already knew what I needed them to do. So I had to really invest in trying to really learn how to train people properly. But how did you learn and develop how to build out that organizational structure to where even if people leave, you know, I have a spot, I can fill it, and we can keep it pushing?
I think the idea, going back to the military, of central command.
Okay.
Right. And you may be familiar, I'm not sure if your audience is aware, in the Navy, there's just this, and that's how they say we had the best Navy, because of this concept of central command, where we understand what the mission is. And because we understand what the mission is, the general doesn't have to be there on the ground with the foot soldier for him to know what the operating procedure and everything is, and it all funnels back up. So I think, and I remember one of your videos too, man, as you talk about, right, how did I learn? One of your videos, and it might be on your Patreon now, but it talked about building out the structure as a leader, having, you know, the two different, I guess really it started, you laid out how to build the org chart. I can't think of it exactly right now, but that also played a role into it. Automation also plays a role into it. A regular meeting cadence, even if you don't have, like you say, even like some meetings maybe 90 minutes, other meetings are 15 minutes, but we know that this meeting is going to be happening every week, so there's nothing that could fall through the cracks.
Okay.
Another thing is the communication is so important, because like in an organization like Bro Capital, for the longest, and many parts are still cooperatively owned and operated, right? So making sure there's an education component to it, but there's also just that guide and that example, so that communication has to be on point. And I think even taking it a step back overall from a high level, I think people buying into the idea is so important, because what's his name? Napoleon Hill in Think and Grow Rich, man.
Okay.
One of the famous quotes that he has in there is that ideas can be sold where goods and services cannot. Okay. Ordinary salesmen do not know this, and that's why they're ordinary. That's one of my favorite quotes. And that was really the thing with Bro Capital, is that when we first started and I was going to black men saying, hey, we're going to start this investment club and we'll be able to pool our capital, invest in each other. All I had was the idea and communication at that time. You know what I'm saying? We didn't have a 6-figure pool like we have now, and have some, you know, investments and return capital, yada, yada, yada to people. So really just getting folks sold on this idea, man. I think that that's so important. I think we skip over that and being charged up about this particular idea. And so, like you say, all of the X's and O's, the central command, the standard operating procedures. And even then, man, you also understand that there's a difference between projects and operations, right? Okay. Operations are something that's going to be continuously going into perpetuity. Projects have a clear start date and end date. And I, you know, have found that for our times with people's attention spans, right, that automation is for that operation. People are for those projects that have a clear start date and a clear end date. You know what I mean? Or even if you're trying to have them do an operation, you want to say, okay, do the operation for these 14 days, and then we'll assess it after that. And then you can start back the 15th day, right? But just keeping people in that loop, and also taking that burden off of, oh, there is no finish line. I got to do this for forever.
Okay, I feel you. That's great. That's great stuff, man, because a lot of people, especially my self-employed people, we struggle from an operational standpoint, because like you just talked about, we just create a job for ourselves. And so we often don't know how to build an operation to kind of separate ourselves from having to do a lot of day-to-day stuff, because it wasn't something that we were trained to do when we were working in the corporate space and working the 9-to-5, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so I think that was a big help to really kind of help us understand how to build operations. You're talking about the weekly meetings, reporting in, so make sure everybody knows what everybody's doing. Yep. I think those things are really, really important.
Yep. Yeah. And also so we have our monthly meeting so that everybody knows what's going on, and then we'll have the meetings in between based upon the teams. And right, in the government they call them committees, but we had called them functional teams inside of in Bro Capital. So yeah, man, just a lot of conversations. I also think about, you know, again, going back to the class, that the pyramids were built through people being together physically, right? People having a lot of conversations even before any bricks were moved, right? Yeah. So thinking about the things, and they still stand, and how many hundreds of thousands, almost millions of years later, right? So that was another thing about Bro Capital too, is that the culture of entrepreneurship now is you build something, 5 to 7 years, you sell it. And for us, it was like, nah, we're tackling a problem that's going to exist as long as a solution doesn't exist. So we've got to be that sustainable institution for 100+ years. And so that's why everything that we've been doing has been with 100 years in mind, that sustainability, building out that culture. Another thing, one of the books that you recommended on your channel was Infinite Games and Finite Games. Right. And one of the pieces in the book talks about the difference between a culture and a society, right? They're both necessary, but the culture is anybody could join the culture. You know what I mean? You could speak the language of hip hop. You could, wear the clothes, right? You could do all the things. But then when it comes to a society, you have to be inducted. You have to know somebody. You have to carry yourself a certain way to get in and to remain on the inside of that, right? So with Bro Capital, it was about building a culture, but it was also about maintaining the integrity of the society at the same time so that we can move forward into the future. So we got to have enough culture to where people can, attach themselves to the brand and develop an affinity for the brand. But from a societal standpoint, we got to be very clear about what our rules and what our standards are and where we're moving to.
Yeah, man, I think what you just said is really, really important, because what you're talking about is being very intentional, deliberate about what you're building, and it not just being a cash grab or something we're just doing for the moment.
Exactly.
What you just said today is a great quote. I'm gonna probably make sure that I remember that, is that the problem's gonna always continue to exist until we create a solution. And I think that's something that a lot of our people don't understand, is that we have to figure out how to create solutions to it and actually employ the solutions and build things around the solution, as opposed to just sitting back talking about the problem.
Yep.
So I think what y'all done in Bro Capital is really, really important, because there's a bunch of brothers that got together and said, okay, how can we create a solution to these problems? You talked about the no interest financing and things of that nature. These are things that have always gone on, that have been problems in our communities. Lack of access to capital, lack of relationships, lack of networks, that nobody doesn't want to really try to figure out how to solve. And so that's something that I think is really, really important, is that y'all have gotten together and figured out how can we solve it? Because if y'all can solve it in y'all area, then you can also create a model for us to solve it in our area.
Exactly.
And I think that's what people are not understanding.
Yep. No, I appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. And Bro Capital started in 2016 as a remote organization, because we were all in different places, right? And so the pandemic came, we were already ahead of the curve in terms of we already having virtual meetings. We're already pooling our capital virtually, right? We don't have to come to a physical place to do this. And another one of the things that we realize is that coming from that national down into this hyper local focus, we could really make even more impact by being focused on a place like Cleveland, but having the support of the national organization. And that's, where we're going next. Shout out to your audience, giving them the insight that, this residential housing market in Cleveland is one of the best in the nation, right? Especially off that 1% rule, where if you buy a house for $100,000, the 1% rule says you should rent it out for $1,000 per month at least. Well, the renter market says that, people paying $1,300, $1,500 a month, but you could have bought the house for, let's say, $90,000, right? So now you're closer to that 1.5, 1.6%. You know what I mean? So we got a great rental market here, and it's time for us to take advantage of it. And so, like you say, pulling our capital national level, and then really having boots on the ground here locally as Black men to really take advantage and take back our communities on that way. So shout out to Buy the Hood as well for giving me that real estate insight.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you're talking about that Cleveland market, because we know that Cleveland has dealt with a little bit of economic downturn from the deindustrialization of the Midwest. And so I'm happy to see that y'all are looking at the future and where Cleveland can go, especially that residential real estate market being relatively hot. Good way for people to get in, because we know down south houses are, just so crazy. People going to start looking for new places to move into, because they're going to get priced out a lot of these other markets.
Yep. You just hit the head, man, that Chicago, relatively next door. And they about 3 times as much, right? So like we got Chicago level amenities here, but at Indiana, West Virginia prices. And so it's only a matter of time that the market is going to catch up and realize that, we see it where inflation is going and people are looking for places to live. So being in position early and just, and you always talk about this on your channel too, having the discipline to get in position, right? And stay in position wait for that move to come. And it may come, right, as we talk in real estate, it may come in 20 years.
Exactly.
But having the structure in place to where even if I'm not here, that the institution is there to still be able to move these, I guess, initiatives and this agenda forward.
Okay, I appreciate that. So let me ask you, because you're talking about something that I really wasn't aware of. We start talking about building structure, building institutions. You really stand the test of time. Where did you get some of that insight from? Did it come from the Navy? Did it come from some type of education you got as a child, as opposed to building a one-person operation and every kind of thing being about? Because one thing I noticed about Bro Capital, there's no cult of personality there, right? So we're not dealing with, we're going to put Roz and put him in the front and everything's about Roz. And that's what we got to do to keep the people engaged. It's about the organization and the structure. Where did you and where did your team get that insight that that's really more important than just trying to build out everything kind of based around this one person?
To be totally honest, the Italian mob.
Okay.
And I shout out to my dad. He, you know, watching Godfather and all of those different movies early on, and just understanding the importance of family, right? So shout out to Bro Capital, but also understanding that none of us is bigger than the program. Exactly. And if you think you bigger than the program, then we'll remove you quickly.
Yeah.
So that was a piece of it. Also, Fidel and Che, right? Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, right? Where they were in Mexico and they took like 100 men from Mexico to Cuba and end up, you know, eventually taking over that island. And you think about how they did it through strategy, right? But really just understanding the why, you know what I'm saying? And keeping that at the forefront. But to your point, where did I get the education from? One of the organizations, and again, I'm and shout out to you and the class that it really affirmed my already thought process, but not being afraid to get into rooms with people who are different than you, sit across the table from you. So for example, right, rubbing elbows with my friends in the Jewish community, right? Rubbing elbows with staunch Republicans, you know what I mean? Not that I just agree with them on everything, but I want to see how they do things and why do they think things a certain way, right? So the American Enterprise Institute is actually funded by the Koch brothers, is related to the Heritage Foundation. It's a very, very conservative think tank, right?
Yeah.
I was invited to their millennial leadership cohort back in 2020.
Okay.
And they were talking about building institutions and the importance of the morality of the leaders who are building that institution, you know, because it's a concept in sociology. And that's another piece too. I get to that, but there's a concept in sociology around founder effects. And the people who found the organization, very similar to America, right? That their energy is going to permeate this thing through and through until the end of it, right? So America being founded upon racism, the 3/5 compromise and theft and all of those things, we're going to see that in America's fabric until America is no more, right? So thinking about Bro Capital, we came from Morehouse, right? So the founders had that Morehouse background. So we already have an understanding the importance of brotherhood, network, and really just Blackness, right? And then of course, even beyond that, we came to the table understanding as so both of us were sociology majors. So we had an acute understanding of these different social problems, but we also had committed to, in our minds, not just studying the problems, but building solutions around these problems. You know what I mean? And so that's how, but at the same time, understanding that we got to have sustainable solutions to be able to build these, to be able to build these solutions. Or we always going to be asking for money from the government. We're going to be asking for money from other rich people, or we're going to be asking money from nonprofit organizations, which are funded by rich people. So that's why that grassroots mobilization and organization, if we all just going to put our own capital in, our own money in, we're going to have checks and balances to where nobody can run off with the bread at any given time. And we just going, you know, 1 foot in forward, 1 foot in front of the other forward until we get there. And so that's pretty much how it is. And shout out to the math as well of, you know, building out a model to where it continues to J curve as we grow. Right. So
yeah, I appreciate that, man, because I think this is something that's not really discussed. Organizational building our infrastructure. And I talked about it, and I've talked about this before, is that the psychology of the people when they're building something, that's going to really determine what they build.
Yep.
And so we got to really understand. There was a sister who was a student of Dr. Clark. She kind of talked about that. I think like in the 90s, you put out a book and kind of broke that down. But that is really important to where if I'm building something or we're building something, who we really are, our morality, our values, our principles, our psychology, it will determine what we create. And so we got to always really think about that when we're building, like where are we really at? What do we really wanted to go? And how is this going to kind of define what we're about when we're putting it together? And it will define what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something I really appreciate about Bro Capital, where it's very, it doesn't come across as over the top. Because I'm connected to you, I know what it stands for, and I've seen y'all stand the test of time. And so that's one thing I really appreciate about y'all is y'all stood the test of time. It's not a fly-by-night operation. Mm-hmm. Y'all not really trying to figure out how to bring a lot of people in based on hype and enthusiasm so y'all could benefit and then kind of leave them there with nothing. And you're very much about what you're about, and it's not just about talking, but it's about doing. And so that's something I talked about earlier in this broadcast is what I really appreciated about you is you took what you learned from me and you went out in the real world and applied it. You didn't just get stuck on, let's just have a conversation about stuff, but I don't go do nothing. Mm-hmm. So what separates you from the pack is you had the will to go do it. Mm-hmm. And those are definitely the people that I'm looking for. So what I appreciate is how God brought us together, because I didn't know you. I knew you from Facebook. I didn't know you in real life.
Word.
But God brought us together. And you was able to get something from me, which really affirmed what you already believed and continue to motivate you to keep doing something in the real world. And I think that's very powerful because we need more of that, because again, this situation that we're currently dealing with is not going to last forever. And we got to start putting people in position that can do things, that can build structures, build systems, build things of that nature, because we're going to need something to fall back on when this thing starts to fall apart. And I think people don't think about that part. They may think about it's going to fall apart, but they don't think about what are we going to do and how can we start building that now. And it's not about a panic or being scared. It's about the methodical, deliberate way in which we build these things out to build something parallel, but also something that we can go to when these other systems no longer work. Because let's to be real with you, we're looking at people that are looking to destroy a lot of the systems that we've been dependent upon.
Yes.
So this is why this type of stuff is important.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. It's interesting, man, because there's a film out. I think it's on Netflix and it's probably on YouTube, but it's called Join or Die.
Okay.
And based upon this book called Bowling Alone, and how in the 90s, bowling was more popular, but people were going bowling by themselves. And so they made money from people actually ordering food. And if you had more of a one person there, then you were more likely to order food. But the premise is that people were starting to divest from groups and other associations and things like that. But the real importance of these groups and these associations is that they fill in the gaps where government can't fill in the gaps. They provide the meals and the coats and, you know, the blankets, right? And the places for homeless people where the government can't necessarily do this work. And so that's important for us to form our own associations. And even if it is small, even if it does start with just you and another person having a mission and saying, this is what we're going to do, it's worth you doing it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, man. So before we get out of here, is there anything that you want to talk to the audience about from a leadership standpoint, anything that we might have missed that you want to bring up?
Man, from a leadership standpoint, and you already know how it is. As soon as we get off, I'll be like, dang, I should have said this.
Yeah.
But nah, man, I think you just reiterating the importance of leadership, right? And I think that, you know, one of the messages that you've been posting out recently is that you don't have to get it 100% in order to be successful, right? You can still get an A on that paper with a 93%, right? You didn't have anything perfect, but you can still reach that highest level. So just taking yourself seriously. Also, one of the things that I was talking to my uncle about the other day was, you know, are you doing what you've been chosen to do, or are you doing what you choose to do, right? So with Bro Capital in particular, I truly feel at this point, like, yeah, this is intrinsically tied to my life's purpose. And I was chosen to do this. And on the days where I missed meals, or account was in the negative, I wasn't thieving and taking from Bro Capital, right? Because I knew that it was bigger than that. You know what I'm saying? And so thinking about, if we're gonna be transparent, our friends at the Tulsa Real Estate Fund and that
Exactly.
whole situation that went on there. It's like, yeah, understanding who you getting involved with, understanding, like you say, this cult of personality, and will this thing be around if they're not in the mix of it, right?
Yeah.
So just building it for succession, man. But nah, man, I appreciate you for just having me on the channel, being able to talk about what we doing at Bro Capital. We also have Sis Capital for Black women, right? So Bro Capital was developed in 2016 when Black women were leading in terms of educational attainment, and they were doing all these different things. All these different social organizations for Black women existed, but there was really nothing for Black men. And so for us, our thesis and our primary belief is that every Black family should be an investment club. We started with Black men. Once we got the Black men, right, got our foot in there, and just the understanding of how we can change things and do better, we now develop Sis Capital for our sisters, wives, mothers, etc. So we could just have a stronger Black family in general. But so yeah, Black men and Black women is open for everybody. I'm excited about the loan fund that we're launching, the interest-free loan fund. I'm also excited about this real estate fund that we'll be launching here in Cleveland to really help with home ownership and start building up and putting money back into these neighborhoods.
All right, man, I'm digging it all, man, because like I say, man, I really appreciate y'all trajectory. We talked about that J curve. I call it the hockey stick curve.
Yes, sir.
I want y'all to just keep pushing, man, because like I say, y'all doing this in real life. We talking about a lot of these other funds, these fly-by-night operations, but y'all are doing it the right way. It's something I'm very passionate about, is bringing on Black people, but also a lot of times Black men that's doing it the right way, because I think a lot of us have been socialized to only want to see the negative.
Right.
And so when the positives show up, we don't even have an appetite or a taste for it, because we've only been our palate has only been kind of designed to get the negative out the situation. That's sometimes another way we can get emotional fulfillment out of a situation. So I think like brothers like you, Bro Capital, we need to continue to push y'all to the forefront, because y'all going about this the right way. Y'all got consistency. Y'all stood the test of time. It's not a fly-by-night operation. Everything is not about Roz or another individual. It's about the organization. So we're going to continue to push on y'all. So what I want you to do, man, is we're going to get back up with you 6 months to a year, see where y'all at with it.
Yes, sir.
We're going to keep pushing.
Yes, sir. I appreciate the work that you do, Diamond Dave.
I mean, hey, man, I'm here for y'all, man, because like I said before, is that I was very convicted about a lot of stuff that I was doing. So I had to make a change, and it feel a lot better to be sitting here talking to you about something. It's positive. It's on the up and up. It's on the level. And we not talking about nothing negative. We not thinking about nothing negative. So it feels better to be in these spaces and to be able to help people in a positive way. Because one thing I learned is that if you can teach somebody to do something negative, you can teach somebody to do something positive. And I really believe that.
That's true. That's true.
All right. So we're going to get up with you, man. So I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Until next time.
No problem.
All right.